My name is Deborah J. Horton, 31 years old. It started over Thai takeout on a Wednesday, the kind of night that feels too ordinary to change your life. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, cartons open, TV paused, when my boyfriend sighed like I'd already disappointed him. He was restless, scrolling his phone like it owed him something, and when I asked if everything was okay, he didn't look up. He just said he'd been thinking, and that sentence alone made my stomach tighten. He told me monogamy wasn't realistic for him. Not us. Him. He said it casually, like he was explaining a preference in music. He talked about feeling trapped, about still loving me, about needing freedom to explore connections. The words were polished, rehearsed, the kind people use when they want something without wanting consequences. I didn't interrupt, so he kept going, confidence growing with every second of my silence. Then he said the part that changed everything. He told me, obviously, I'd stay loyal. He didn't want things getting messy. I asked him to repeat that, honestly thinking I'd misheard. He rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. According to him, this was fair. He was naturally desired, his words, not mine. I didn't need the same freedom because I already had him. He framed it like a compliment, like I should be grateful I was enough while he sampled options. When I told him it sounded one-sided, he laughed. Not nervously, not uncertainly. He laughed like the conversation was already over. He asked if I was seriously comparing us, leaned back, crossed his arms, and said if I loved him, I wouldn't try to control him. If I didn't agree, it would say a lot about my insecurity. It was a perfect trap. Agree, or become the problem. So I looked at him, calm, quiet, and I said, okay. His face changed instantly. Relief. Satisfaction. He smiled like he'd won something, kissed my cheek, told me he knew I'd be mature about it. He didn't ask what I meant by okay, and I didn't explain. Not yet. For about a week after that, things were strangely calm. He was lighter, happier, humming while getting ready, suddenly invested in workouts he used to skip. He kept calling me understanding, like it was a trait he'd unlocked. I didn't ask questions. That seemed to bother him more than anything else. He wanted me to react, to flinch, to show jealousy. Instead, I cooked dinner, asked about his day, and went back to my laptop. Every time his phone buzzed and I didn't look up, his eyes flicked toward me, checking. Nothing came. 3 days in, he tested it. He said he was meeting a friend after work, might be late. He hovered in the doorway, waiting for me to object. I told him to drive safe. He frowned, annoyed, and left like I'd failed a test he thought I was taking. By the end of the week, the dig started. He said most women would be freaking out. He said his coworkers thought I was either very confident or very naive. He told me not to embarrass myself by getting attached. That one stayed with me. It wasn't a warning, it was a reveal. Saturday night, he didn't come home. No text, no explanation. The next morning, he walked in like nothing happened, heels in hand, smelling like someone else's cologne. He asked if I was good. I told him I was. He smirked and said this was why the arrangement worked, because I knew my place. That was the moment something inside me went very still. I didn't correct him. I didn't argue. What he didn't know was that while he was out testing his freedom, I was watching patterns form. Names repeat, stories slip, and when someone is given all the rope they want, eventually they stop being careful with it. I went to bed that night knowing one thing for certain. Saying okay wasn't agreement. It was the moment I stopped trying to convince someone to respect me and started letting the truth expose itself. For a few days after that conversation, it was almost peaceful in a way that felt artificial, like the calm after someone's already decided to leave but hasn't packed yet. He moved through the apartment lighter, humming, confident, as if my okay had lifted a weight he'd been carrying for months. He started taking longer showers, choosing outfits with more intention, lingering in front of the mirror like he was rehearsing a version of himself meant for a different audience. He kept calling me understanding. He said it like it was a compliment, like he'd finally unlocked the correct setting on me. I knew you'd get it, he told me one night while tying his shoes. Not everyone's secure enough for this. I smiled politely and went back to chopping vegetables. The praise felt hollow, conditional, like it would vanish the second I stopped performing it correctly. The thing he didn't expect was how little I asked. I didn't demand updates. I didn't want timelines or names or reassurances. I didn't ask him where he was going or who he was texting. That bothered him more than jealousy ever could have. He wanted reaction. He wanted proof that I was still competing for him. Instead, I carried on with my routines, answered emails, folded laundry, watched shows he didn't like. Every time his phone buzzed, he'd glance at me out of the corner of his eye, waiting. When I didn't look up, he'd frown slightly, like a performer missing applause. On the third night, he hovered by the door again and said he might be late. I told him to drive safe. He paused, turned back, and said, "That's it?" I asked what he wanted me to say. He didn't answer. He left irritated, which I found interesting, considering he was supposedly getting exactly what he asked for. By Friday, the comments started slipping. Small ones at first, easy to miss if you weren't listening. Most women wouldn't be this chill. My coworker thinks you're either really confident or really naive. Just don't get attached. That last one wasn't concern. It was a warning wrapped in a joke, and it told me exactly how he saw me. Stable, predictable, safe enough to leave behind without worry. Saturday night, he didn't come home at all. No text, no explanation, nothing, until late the next morning when he walked in like he'd just gone for a jog. Hair messy, jacket slung over his arm, smelling like a stranger. He dropped his bag by the door and asked if I was good. I said yes. He studied my face, disappointed, then smirked and said, "See, this is why this works. You know your place." That was when the picture finally sharpened. This wasn't about exploration or honesty or freedom. It was about control. He liked having a safety net he didn't have to respect. He liked knowing I'd be there, steady and quiet, while he proved something to himself with other people. He wasn't confused. He wasn't searching. He was enjoying the imbalance. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. I watched. And while he grew bolder, I grew quieter. Not because I was shrinking, but because I was done explaining myself to someone who'd already decided what I was worth. What he didn't realize was that every careless comment, every late night, every smug smile was giving me clarity, and clarity has a way of ending things long before anyone says the word goodbye. The confession didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came the way everything else had, casually, like he was checking something off a list. He walked in one night, buzzing with energy, tossed his keys onto the counter, kicked off his shoes, and said he'd grab drinks after work with a coworker. He waited, watching me like a scientist observing a reaction. I asked if he'd had fun. He paused, eyes narrowing. "You're not going to ask anything else?" I asked if I should. He scoffed and said sometimes he wondered if I even cared. That line was rich, coming from someone who'd redefined loyalty to suit himself. He leaned against the counter and said this was exactly why he needed the arrangement. I was safe, predictable. Other women reminded him he still had options. The way he said options made my stomach settle in a way that surprised me. Not angry, clear. He wasn't speaking to me as a partner. He was explaining a hierarchy. Later that night, his phone sat unlocked beside him on the couch while he dozed. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. Earlier that day, a mutual friend had mentioned a last name in passing. Careless, unimportant to her, everything to me. With a last name, patterns become easy. He started complaining about a specific coworker too often, in that irritated tone people use when they're hiding interest. She was annoying. She flirted too much. She thought she was smarter than everyone. His phone buzzed every time he said her name. He smiled without realizing it. The next evening, he came home late again and went straight to the shower without saying hello. I heard him humming through the steam, comfortable, confident, like someone who thought they'd already won. His phone lit up on the coffee table, the same name flashing again and again. I didn't touch it. I just looked. When he came out wrapped in a towel and caught my eyes on the screen, his expression flipped. Defensive, sharp. He told me it wasn't my business anymore. I raised an eyebrow and reminded him he was the one who said transparency mattered. He laughed, not kindly, and asked if I cared now. Then he said it, like he was explaining basic math. Yes, he'd slept with her. That was the point. He told me he hadn't said anything because I'd make it weird, and before I could respond, he added that no, I didn't get the same freedom. That wasn't what we agreed on. He reminded me I'd said okay. That smug certainty again, like consent could be retroactive and one-directional. Then he crossed the line fully. He said the woman actually challenged him, that she was married, so she understood discretion. No drama. I didn't react. I just nodded, filing the words away like receipts. He kept talking, oblivious. Said her husband wouldn't even be surprised, that things were basically dead at home. I asked him her name. He froze, asked why. I said curiosity. He studied me, suspicious now, then shrugged and said he didn't remember. Something basic. That told me everything I needed to know about how carefully he'd thought this through. He went to bed early that night, satisfied, convinced he'd asserted dominance. I stayed on the couch with my laptop open and typed the full name I already had into a search bar. It took minutes. Job, photo, neighborhood. From there, finding her husband was embarrassingly easy. Same last name, family photos, smiling captions about trust and teamwork. An anniversary post from 6 months ago. People assume okay means surrender. Sometimes it just means you've stopped arguing and started letting the truth speak for itself. I went to sleep knowing exactly who needed to hear it next. Friday morning, he left for work like nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek and told me to be good today, the way you talk to someone you think is housebroken. He added, almost as an afterthought, that he might stay out again. I said okay. That word still worked magic on him. As soon as the door closed, the apartment felt quieter, clearer. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, and sat at the table without rushing. I had everything I needed: a full name, a job title, a public profile that led to another. I didn't message right away. I waited until lunch, until the morning noise settled into something steady. When I did write, it was brief and factual. Dates, context, screenshots I'd saved quietly from a time he bragged about discretion in messages he forgot synced to our shared tablet. I ended with one sentence I meant. I'd want to know if it were me. Then I put my phone down and went for a walk. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. He was calling. I didn't answer. Minutes after that, the front door slammed so hard the frame rattled. He came home early, shaking, furious, not sad. He demanded to know what I'd done. I told him nothing he hadn't done first. He accused me of being manipulative, petty, vindictive. He said I'd ruin lives over something that wasn't that serious. I asked him why discretion mattered so much if everything was harmless. He screamed that I had no right, that I was supposed to be loyal. That word again, loyal, like a leash he'd been holding. He paced, phone glued to his hand, and finally hissed that the woman's husband had kicked him out. I nodded and said that sounded inconvenient. That was when he looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. I told him calmly that okay never meant protecting his secrets. He stared at me, stunned, and for the first time since this started, he looked scared. Not of losing me, but of losing control. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves. Saturday morning, he sat at the table rereading messages like he could reverse them by force. She wasn't answering him. Her husband had blocked him. He told me none of this would have happened if I hadn't gone nuclear. I said if his situation couldn't survive daylight, that wasn't on me. He rewrote history in real time, said he'd been honest, that I'd been passive-aggressive, that a married woman's marriage wasn't his responsibility. He never apologized, not once. By Sunday evening, he said he didn't think he could be with someone who would embarrass him like this. I told him that was probably for the best. He blinked, confused, then angry. He said I couldn't just decide that. I said I could, and I had. We'd figure out logistics, but the relationship was over. He stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. I slept on the couch and felt lighter than I had in weeks. Monday felt surreal. We moved around each other like polite strangers. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya, a coworker of his I'd met a few times at work events. She asked if I was okay. I told her not really, but I would be. She said people were talking, that I didn't deserve any of it. We texted a bit, nothing flirty, just human. She told me he'd been bragging at work, calling me stable like it was a flaw, saying I'd never leave. Apparently that story didn't age well. When he got home that evening, he noticed my phone light up and snapped, asking who I was texting. I said a friend. He laughed bitterly and accused me of moving fast, of trying to humiliate him by talking to people he worked with. I reminded him he didn't get to interrogate me anymore. He said no one actually wanted me, that it was pity, that was it. I told him he had until the end of the week to pack. The apartment was in my name. Utilities were covered for the month. After that, we were done. He said I'd regret it. I said regret weighed less than disrespect. By Thursday night, his bags were by the door. He took calls loudly, laughing too hard, waiting for jealousy that never came. Then his phone rang, and he turned away, whispering angrily. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. He said her husband had told HR. I said that was rough. He looked at me like he was finally seeing the pattern. I told him I hadn't planned anything. I'd just stopped covering for him. He left without another word. Later that night, Maya asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, no drama attached. For the first time since he said the word open, the future didn't feel heavy. It felt quiet. Quiet felt like peace. The apartment felt different once he was gone. Not empty, honest. The air didn't feel like it was waiting for the next comment to land sideways or the next door to slam. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. No looping conversations in my head, no buzzing anxiety under my ribs. When I woke up, the silence wasn't lonely. It was clean. He texted the next afternoon, "We need to talk." I didn't answer right away. I finished my workday, went to the gym, took my time showering, letting the hot water rinse off the last of the tension I'd been carrying like armor. When I finally replied, it was simple. About what? He said he wanted closure, that things had ended unfairly, that I owed him a conversation where I actually explained myself. I told him we could talk once, one time. That was it. He came over that evening. No bags, no performance outfit, just jeans and a hoodie. Stripped of the confidence he used to weaponize. He looked tired, smaller somehow. He sat across from me and started crying almost immediately. Said he never thought I'd actually leave. Said he assumed I'd fight, beg, try harder. He admitted he liked knowing I was there, no matter what he did. He said it like a confession, like it was supposed to earn him something. I asked him if he understood how messed up that sounded. He wiped his face and said he didn't think I had a backbone. At least he was honest. He asked if there was someone else. I didn't give him details. I just said I wasn't alone anymore, if that's what he meant. That hurt him more than yelling ever could have. He accused me of embarrassing him. I told him he underestimated me. He said he felt blindsided. I said he ignored every warning sign. At one point, he asked quietly if all the okay stuff meant I'd been waiting. I told him no. It meant I'd accepted that he wasn't who I thought he was. That ended it. He left without hugging me, without slamming the door, finally understanding he didn't control the narrative anymore. Later that night, I met Maya for coffee. Just coffee. No declarations, no rebounds, no revenge energy. We talked like adults talk when there's no agenda. She asked what I learned from all of this. I thought about it and told her that silence isn't consent, and calm doesn't mean weak. She smiled and said she was glad I knew that now. Over the next few weeks, things settled into something steady. Maya and I didn't rush anything. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinners. Conversations stayed mutual, easy, respectful. The contrast was immediate and almost shocking. The first time I disagreed with her about something small, where to eat, she laughed and said, "Fair point." That was it. No punishment, no scorekeeping, no power play. That's when I realized how much work I'd been doing before, just to exist in my own relationship. He texted one last time. A long message, apology adjacent, still centered on how everything had blown up around him. Job tension, friend drama, loneliness. No real ownership, just consequences he didn't like. I wished him well and didn't respond again. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel smug. I don't even feel angry anymore. What I feel is clear. He wanted an open relationship where the rules only protected him. He wanted loyalty without respect, patience without reciprocity, and silence mistaken for weakness. He thought okay meant permission. What it actually meant was that I stopped arguing with someone committed to misunderstanding me and let reality handle the rest. Calling his married coworker's spouse wasn't revenge. Moving on wasn't strategy. None of it was about winning. It was about refusing to participate in a game that was rigged from the start. If there's one thing I know now, it's this. When someone tells you who they are and what they think you're worth, listen the first time. And remember, calm acceptance is not surrender. Sometimes it's just the moment you decide you're done.